Then a hurricane came and devastation reigned. Our man saw his future dripping down the drain. Put a pencil to his temple, connected it to his brain, and he wrote his first refrain, a testament to his pain. Well, the word got around. They said, this kid is insane, man. We got to get started, so there's no more singing Hamilton. Let's share my screen with you. We'll go to the notes. Anyways, I'm done. Sorry. I had to put you through that. All right. Lab 3, day 3, homework, morality of an act. Go ahead and get started. So, as we've been discussing, there are 3 elements that determine the morality of an act in Christian morality. The first is the object, which is that specific action. That's what we do. The second is the intention, is the intended outcome or goal, why we do that action. And the third is the circumstances, which is the situation or the context, or it's the conditions affecting the moral decision. So where did this take place? When did it take place? How? What was happening? With whom were you? What were the consequences, etc.? You can't, Catholic morality says you cannot just look at one of these. You have to look at all 3 of them to determine whether something is morally right or morally wrong. So let's talk about this. For an act to be morally good in Catholicism, both the object and the intention must be good. If the object is good, but the intention is bad, so let's say that you do service, but the only reason you do it is so that you can look good in front of others, well, that's not a good intention. It's a bad intention. And not just looking good, but you just do it to try to impress someone or to try to be someone you're not, then it's morally wrong. If you do a bad object for a good intention, like we talked about the other day, torturing someone, even if the intention is good, that's still morally wrong. Both the object and the intention must be good. What about the circumstances? Well, this affects our moral freedom, our culpability. So on day 2, we talked all about culpability and when we are to blame. So sometimes the circumstances, we're in high distress or high anxiety or mental illness or different things, a lot of peer pressure, that can affect how culpable we are, or it can affect how good or bad an action is. So for example, if you decide to do the right thing when everybody else is making fun of you, that actually makes that act better than if nobody was making fun of you, right? It makes it a morally better action because you are overcoming the adversity. Now, some actions are always morally wrong. So this is what we'd call intrinsically evil. Rape, killing someone who's innocent, torture, these things always violate human life and dignity. And so there are some actions that will always hurt others, always hurt ourselves, whereas some depend on the intention. But some in Catholic moral thinking are always wrong. And in Catholicism, the end does not justify the means. So Catholics don't believe that a good outcome justifies whatever you do to get there. So for example, we wouldn't have any crime in the United States if we just killed all the criminals. But that doesn't make it okay. The end of no crime does not make it okay to kill criminals. And that we believe there is a human life and dignity, and that in the end, that would probably hurt society more than anything. The end wouldn't just be no crime, it would actually hurt society because it would be based on violence and fear. Okay, so this one is a little complicated. It's called the principle of double effect. So a lot of times in life, situations are not just so black and white. There's a lot of gray area. So what if you do something that has both a good and a bad consequence? Right? What if you do something that has both good and bad as a result? And this is just the reality of life sometimes. Catholic moral teaching says you are allowed to carry out that action if the act itself is not evil. If you only wanted the good effect to happen, you might have seen that the bad effect was going to happen, but you didn't intend for that. You didn't want it, right? You regret that the bad effect happens, but you don't want that to happen. If the good effect is not a direct result of the bad effect, if the good being done is proportional to the bad effect, and if there are no other options. So what would be an example? Let's say, classic example of a woman is pregnant and she has uterine cancer. So what do you do? Now, Catholicism would say that killing that baby, intentionally killing that baby, is wrong, that abortion is always wrong. But what if you remove the diseased uterus? You remove the diseased uterus, the act of removing a diseased organ is not evil. What would happen? Well, you would cure the mother. Now, what would also happen, and this is the regrettable byproduct, you don't want the baby to die, but you foresee that removing the uterus would most likely kill the baby. The mother is not healed because the baby died. The baby died does not cure the mother's cancer. The mother is cured from the removing of the diseased organ. They're both a consequence of the action. It's trading one life for the other, so the good being done is proportional to the bad effect, and there are no other options in this situation. The trolley problem would be another example of this, right? The act of diverting a train is not evil. You don't intend for the bad person, you don't want the bad person to die, and the people aren't saved because the one person dies. The people are saved because the train switched tracks. And 5 lives versus 1, there's no other options. And this is why the fat man situation would be considered morally wrong. Because the act of pushing someone in front of a train is evil. And the people being saved is a direct result of the man being pushed in front of the train. So you can see the difference here. This gives us a structure to look at the difference between these two actions. Or saving someone from a grenade, right? Killing yourself is not bad, but jumping on a grenade to save others, the good, you might foresee that you would die, but that's not what you intend. You intend to help others. It's a direct result. You get it. Which brings us to our final slide about legitimate defense. And legitimate defense is, again, one of these gray areas that limited violence is morally acceptable if you are defending yourself or others. Again, this should be a last resort. This is a byproduct of that principle of double effect, and that sometimes it's a duty for us to protect others. And actually, both legally and in morality, there are differences between murder, which is intentionally killing someone with forethought, between manslaughter, which is accidentally killing someone, and then homicide, which is just general killing someone else. That maybe not all homicides are morally wrong if we are defending ourselves. And again, this must be a last resort, and it must be proportional. You shouldn't just kill someone because they are, maybe trying to steal your car and they're 50 feet away from you. Your life is not in danger then. And that gets into kind of these gray areas. But it's interesting that both legally and morally, both in Christianity and in the US legal system, there are differences between different kinds of killing someone, where we recognize that intention and circumstances play a role in how you determine the morality of an action. At the same time, many Christians have renounced violence completely, even to the point of not defending themselves, laying their lives down, becoming a martyr. So that is it for today. You need to stop by my open lab to hear some more Hamilton rapping. That's great. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. I look forward to discussing this with you in class.